All right, my name is Benjamin Falter. I am conducting an interview with Amanda Pritchard at the Ontario County Historical Society as part of an oral history workshop put on with the Wood Library. And it is March 3rd, 2022 today. So I'll just start by asking you a pretty general question. You said you primarily grew up in the Pinn area, like me. So I'm just interested in hearing what you have to say about growing up in Pinn and what it was like there when you were a kid.
Well, I feel that I was quite fortunate growing up in Pinn in the 1980s and early 90s. Pinn was a place where, I could walk to Morgan's grocery store because we lived in town, and I could pick up candy and take it back up and share it with the neighborhood kids who were younger than me. I had friends that lived within bicycle riding distance, so visiting them was fun. I wish that I had family that lived in town, but there were always things to do. You didn't get to experience this, but I was able to grow up in the time when the Buckwheat Festival was still a thing. And during Buckwheat Festival in the fall, or late summer I should say, they had places around town where you could pick up a bus. Being summoned.
I'm sorry about that. You were talking about going to the Buckwheat Festival.
Yes, more specifically, I remember the buses. They would have these wonderful little pickup locations that were stationed around town. So the kids could just walk to the closest one, similar to like a school bus pickup, but more spread out than that. Mine was, the closest one for me was behind what's now the Once Again shop.
Okay.
So it was sort of that corner in town near Long's Cards and Books on Main Street. And then they would bus us up to the fairgrounds, which was a hike if you were young. And I would take my father's change from the jar and get to go up and we'd hang out at the Buckwheat Festival all day. Because it was the place to be, and it was a lot of fun. And seeing all the older kids, and this reminds me of old movies, but they really did walk around with giant peas on their jackets, because Letterman jackets were a thing once upon a time. By the time I was in high school, it had fizzled out, but it was a lot of fun. So it was a good place to grow up, and nothing beat Keuka Lake in the whole wide world. I learned how to swim in that lake for the most part. I was one of the kids that went to Yates Daycare that turned into Rainbow Junction later.
Okay. Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember Dr. Rogoff from Keuka College area, but his wife Marcia was the director of something, and she was an incredible woman also. But anyway, we had swimming lessons, and we walked from the daycare center to Indian Pines every day during the summer, and they would cart lunches to us, and we spent the entire summer at the lake. So we learned how to swim, we played with all sorts of kids. It was a good place to be. Pinn was fun. I can't wait to hear how you think of Pinn, how much it's changed. But,
yeah.
But I enjoyed growing up in Pinn.
Great. I had never heard of the Buckwheat Festival before just now. Is there anything else you remember about it that you can share, or?
Well, if you've spent any time in Pinn, if you are going over the bridge on Main Street, you will see a humongous griddle.
Yep.
And I was at the largest pancake event, and I did have a piece of that burnt pancake. And believe it or not, we have photos from that event at my house, because that was a big deal for that little teeny tiny town of Pinn in the village. And it was a festival that was put on, I believe, from Burkett Mills Company, but it became humongous, and they had some amazing concerts. I remember that it was my first time I ever saw a beer tent as a child as well. I didn't know what a beer tent was. But they had a huge tent, and they had some big names, but right now all of those are escaping me. I wasn't really a concert goer. As a kid, I was there to see the rides, to see the attractions and eat buckwheat ice cream. And they had a parade every year, which was probably similar to all other parades, but to me, having candy thrown at me, and it wasn't Memorial Day, was exciting. Another reason to have a parade. So the Buckwheat Festival fizzled out, I believe, my senior year, which was in '98, but it could have been '97. It was the good memories, a lot of good memories. Buckwheat ice cream, buckwheat pizza. They would make the crust with buckwheat. It had a very unique flavor. But the highlight of the Buckwheat Festival for my age group, other than the rides, would have been this giant box filled with buckwheat hulls. They were these little brown, flat disc, cup-shaped things. They were very small, smaller than your pinky nail. And they would throw penny candy into it. And the children would just dive into it. And you would find buckwheat hulls in every space of your body that should not have buckwheat. All of your pockets were filled. You had to remove your shoes to go into it, but it was one of those things that every kid did. And we would have buckwheat in our hair and in our ears and in our underpants when we'd get home. But it was a good time. It really was.
That sounds fun. What was Pinn, Academy like when you were going there?
Dated. The building itself was dated. They had a major renovation at some point after I graduated. Right now the building is unrecognizable to me. And I've been there for something, but I was lost. I was disoriented.
Yeah.
The general horseshoe, I believe, is still there. But the cafeteria, I believe, is a gym now, gymnasium, sort of near the fields. I get lost. It's completely different. I voted at the middle school for a while, and that one went through a renovation after I finished there too. So the buildings are no longer what I pictured. As for the academics, I didn't focus on that. So I went to high school to hang out with my friends. I spent most of my days in the music suite, hanging out with people. They had all these little practice rooms, and we spent most of our time on the floor, hiding behind the doors in the practice rooms.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I had a really tight group of girlfriends. There were, I think, 11 of us that were just inseparable, and I'm still tight with one of them to this day. And almost all of us became teachers, which is kind of entertaining, but almost every single one of us went into the teaching field. But, I graduated, and we've had reunions.
Sure.
But as for the academy itself, the pool's still on the 3rd floor, probably.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess the pool's still there.
Yeah.
And I'm going to guess that it still has that funky sock onion smell. Other than that, I don't really know much.
Yeah. Okay. What other sorts of things, you mentioned the Buckwheat Festival and swimming in Cuca Lake. What other sorts of things did you do, for fun growing up in Pinn?
Well, we listened to a lot of music. There was a wonderful radio station when I was in high school called The Nerve, which played alternative rock. We went ice skating and roller skating in Geneva. There was a roller dome up there, so we traveled to Geneva a bit. When I was in high school, we created a path. Everybody got in a car. We packed into cars, and we did a U-turn at McDonald's. We went through town over and over and over again, but fuel was 99 cents a gallon, and it was the thing we could do.
Yeah.
As for actual entertainment in Pinn, it was somebody's house.
Yeah.
Pinn was not designed for things. When I was very young, the Owl's Nest existed. I believe it fell in the 2014 flood, the building that the Owl's Nest was in. It was in the corner of Basin and Seneca Street, I believe, somewhere in there. But it fell in when Basin Street flooded, along with parking behind Lloyd's. Lloyd's is gone too, but
Yeah.
it's so sad.
Different reasons.
So sad. But, the Owl's Nest was a place that had some adolescent dance type things, but I didn't really hang out there. There was a lot of church things. We did as much as we could, but again, Pinn was mostly hanging out with friends. I don't know what it was like for you, but I'll find out.
So you finished high school in 97, 98, and then did you go straight to Keuka College after that?
I did not.
Okay.
I spent 2 years at FLCC in the 2+2 program, and I took classes at FLCC that could transfer to Geneseo or Keuka College. And when I finished at FLCC, I transferred into Keuka, and all of my credits went with me, along with my tuition, which helped pay for my first semester.
Yep.
I was a regular ed elementary major and a special ed major. So I was dually certified, and I have a permanent teaching certification. I was one of the last ones that was able to get that, because now it's called professional, and you have to have a certain number of hours each year to maintain your certification. So after I finished Keuka, I decided I did not want to take the GREs, and I did not want to apply to more schools, and they offered everybody in their undergrad program a spot in their master's program, so I just continued at Keuka. My most favorite story out of my senior year at Keuka, which is actually a difficult story, was they took all of our resumes and they sent them out to every school district nearby, and we all had to interview against each other in real life. And there were 4 of us that showed up for the second interview. And somehow the girl I had to interview against mixed up the times. They said quarter of, and she thought they said quarter after. And I got the job after interviewing against 12 of my classmates. So I felt fortunate, but they all got jobs. Every single one of us was able to be employed, but it was just a fluke.
Yeah.
She would have been a tough one to interview against. I don't remember her first name, but I remember her last name. And I was able to spend 16 years teaching in Bath in the elementary school. So I was 12 years in kindergarten, and then 4 years in second grade. And I think that going to Keuka was good for that. And if I hadn't gone to FLCC, it probably wouldn't have happened, because Keuka's expensive.
Keuka's very expensive. Yeah.
It's a good school, but pricey.
Yes. When you were going to Keuka, do you remember much about the condition of Ball Hall?
Ball Hall?
Because I know it got renovated in late aughts, early 2010s. I don't remember the exact time frame it got renovated in.
Yeah, I was out of there by then.
Yeah.
So I started probably in 2000 with my undergrad work, and then I believe 2004 for my grad work, or 2006, somewhere in there. So that would have been finished by the time the renovations had started. But also, as a commuter, I lived in Pinn. I lived in Keuka Park. I did not live on campus, so I saved money not living on campus. But that also means that I didn't spend a lot of time in buildings that I didn't attend classes in.
Sure.
So as for Ball Hall, it's a beautiful historic building, but I spent more time running the Lake Road, because that was my running route. So I can tell you more about the the houses that were torn down and the cottages and rebuilt.
Yeah, if you don't mind telling me a little bit about that.
It's the same thing that's happened on all of the lakes. They have houses on them around here. The little cottages are purchased, multiple cottages side by side, and these big beautiful homes are put in. And the cottages have made it so lake access to places that don't have as many parks is difficult. It's everywhere. But Pinn would not survive without the income of the lake, and that's what brings Pinn to life every summer. The locals hate it.
Yep.
Every local will tell you that the lake is the summer is the worst time to live in Pinn, but without it, Pinn would starve.
Yeah, it's a real double-edged sword there.
Indeed.
For sure. Yeah. Okay, so you moved to Ontario County as an adult with your husband. How did you and your husband meet?
So my husband and I met at a little bar in Pinn called the Keuka restaurant. My sister worked for Josh and Art between the Swits and the Keuka restaurant, and she was bartending at the Cuca at the time. And I went in, I was having a rough day, and there was this man sitting there, and my sister had to run off and do something, and she said, "Sit here, his name is Seth, he's a nice guy, I'll be right back." And I did not know at the time that Seth was going through his own personal issues. He didn't tell me that day that he was going through a divorce, but he was, and I was going through a breakup, and we hit it off. Let's see, we dated, goodness, I can't even tell you how exactly long. I think we were seeing each other, but he was going through some much more legal business than I was. So we were seeing each other, but I refused to actually be his girlfriend until things were finalized.
Sure.
And then I went to Colorado for a trip. My apartment in Strong Hall was sold to Cuca College, so I was going to move back in with my father until I found some place to live. He was living at Cuca Lake State Park as the manager. And when I got back from my trip to Colorado, my dad dropped me off with my suitcases at Seth's house, and I never moved out. We were married less than a year later, I believe, maybe a year later, but we were married shortly after that, and now we've been married 9 years.
Wow, that's awesome. That's a great, cute meat story, or meet cute.
It's all right.
Okay, so then your husband's family has lived on and owned a farm in North Canandaigua, Farmington area for like 200 years.
Yes, this
thereabouts.
is something I'm very interested in, so I will try to keep this short. But yes, the Pritchards show up in 1850 in Farmington on County Road 8, and they have lived in a 3-mile radius since then. They have not moved more than 3 miles. And they were there before 1850, but they were too young to show up on a census because it was only the head of household that owned land at the time. So they've been here for a long time, and they haven't gone anywhere. They're still farming some of the same land that they've had in their hands for 120 years. We did find an article where the original farm was sold up on County Road 8 in 1929. So one of the brothers had sold that, but the brother that my husband is a descendant of we've owned that land as a family since 1900.
Wow.
It's still being farmed by the Pritchards.
Awesome.
They haven't gone anywhere.
Yeah.
They're not going anywhere anytime soon.
Doesn't sound like it. So it's still an active farm.
It is.
What sorts of things are produced there?
Well, we're a cash crop farm.
Okay.
And we do a lot with soy and corn, but right now it seems to be the hay through the racetrack that most of our sales seem to go through. My husband could obviously describe this much better than I can, but right now every day we're taking hay to somebody somewhere, and all from like March till November it's to the racetrack every day for loads and loads between certain times, because they only allow certain times a day for deliveries. But the racetrack is a huge part of that. We have recently done some conservation with land along 332. The developments and mostly the car dealerships along that have spread out. Now with shortages, things are looking a little sparse in some of those places, but they'd like to spread out into the housing developments. So we've done some conservation easement things with the Finger Lakes Land Trust to make sure that some of the land can continue to be farmland, and also some of the places for the animals to be.
Okay. I confess that I know next to nothing about farming, so that's interesting to me. I never would have thought of like hay as sort of a cash crop, I guess.
Well, we grow alfalfa and timothy and orchard grasses, which are used for different times of the year for different animals, and they bale it, they store it, and then they sell it. So I guess it would be a crop.
Yeah.
We have fields designated for certain types of hay.
No, I mean, that all makes sense to me. It's just, like I said, it's just nothing I ever really thought much about, I
We have
guess.
dabbled in some of the more popular things. We've tried to grow barley. We've
Okay.
struggled with finding malt houses that can take barley for making beers and things like that. We also work hand in hand with, not hand in hand, I shouldn't say that. We work closely with Southern Tier Distilling, which is it's towards Jamestown.
Mhm.
And they make a lot of, I guess, alcohol, like liquors, and so they get a lot of corn and wheat and a lot of rye from us to make spirits.
Great. All right. Now, do you and your husband have kids?
We have a son.
Okay.
He is 4.
Okay.
He is, if you ask him what he wants to be a farmer. He loves race cars. This morning he was playing in the snow with a tractor. So he's a sweet little boy. He goes to school at up in Pumpkin Hook at the Lutheran Church. Or I'm sorry, yes, the St. John's Lutheran Church. And it's fun to drive up through there because as we drive along, I can tell him whose house is, which house was owned by which family member a long time ago, and where great grandma, who's still alive, used to live and walk to school on 96 from Tuttle's Crossing and things like that. So it's kind of fun to be able to take a little historic trip every day on our way to Pumpkin Hook.
Yeah. It sounds like you're really instilling a love of that sort of family history and legacy.
Well, if he's going to stay in the 3-mile radius, he's going to have to love it.
He's gonna have to. He's gonna have to love it. That's for sure. That's for sure. Well, great. Is there anything else in particular you want to tell me about your husband's family and farmland, or about your experience, moving there and what that was like?
Well, when we first moved to this area, we were actually in Gorham. His family farm is still there, but we had a horse farm in Gorham. But when we moved to Farmington area, we're technically northern Canandaigua, but I feel like we're part of Farmington too. It opened up almost an interest in the farm. So great-grandma lives on what they called Entrenchment Hill. As a historian, you may or may not know that locally as a term. I still am not 100% sure what that means, but it has something to do with battles of Native Americans and trenches. But I truly don't know what that means. It's one of the things on my many to-do thing list.
I mean, it could be related to the Sullivan expedition, but I'm not 100% sure on that one.
Beats me, but I know it's something I need to look up someday. And the fact that we live in the house that my husband's great uncle lived in, and they were able to send us photographs of that home from the 1950s when they renovated it, and then when we renovated it in 2020, we were able to see when we pulled down things, and we were able to see history from our own family, because my husband's cousins grew up in that house. It was Dan's cousins technically, and grandma's house next door, the neighbors, that's where we have pictures from 1900 of family members standing outside the house with their dog Nero that could go down in your display for your pets. A dog that's probably buried on that piece of property. So, living here has made us spend more time looking into my husband's history, and that was a lot of fun. And it also helped me become involved more with Historical Society and Farmington's, the South Farmington Chapel, just because it's interesting. A lot of his family is here, their bones, but, their history is here. Yeah. You open up a book, you drive down a road, they're here. And that's kind of cool that my son descends from that.
Yeah.
My family's not quite as interesting, they're scattered, so, but.
My family too.
Still fun.
Well, cool. Well, thank you. We've been going for about 40 minutes. I think that's a pretty good pretty good length interview. Unless you have anything else you'd want to end on. Well, thank you so much, Amanda. And yeah, we'll call it there.
Sounds wonderful.